Naomi Carter is a ghost in her own life, a quiet farm girl who tends the soil and endures the cruel whispers of her small town. To the local boys, she is an easy target, a black girl with her head down, seemingly powerless. Their pranks are a sport, their laughter a weapon. But they are blind to the legacy she carries. Her late father, a man of quiet strength and discipline, left her more than just a farm. He left her an arsenal of skill, forged in the pre-dawn hours of their barn. When their taunts escalate into a violent, muddy assault, Naomi is faced with a choice that could shatter her fragile existence. Swallow their humiliation to protect the life she has, or unleash the fighter she was raised to be. They came for a victim. They found a warrior. And in the quiet of the woods, they will learn that the most dangerous storms rise from the calmest earth. The rooster's cry was not an alarm, but a confirmation. Naomi Carter was already awake. She existed in the liminal space between night and day, her body attuned to the farm's rhythm long before the sun thought to bleed over the horizon. In the chill dark of her room, she pulled on worn boots and a flannel shirt that smelled of earth and soap. She moved through the silent farmhouse, a familiar ghost avoiding the third creaky floorboard outside her mother's door. Outside, the world was a study in monochrome, the stars fading into a sky the color of a fresh bruise. Her breath plumed in the air as she made for the chicken coop, the hens clucking a soft greeting. "Morning, ladies," she whispered, her voice hoarse with sleep. She scattered feed and collected warm eggs, each smooth shell a small, perfect promise in her palm. This was her meditation. The simple, grounding tasks that connected her to the land her great-grandfather had bought against all odds. She checked the irrigation lines, her fingers testing the dark, rich soil. It was good land, hard-won land. As the sky lightened to a soft pearl gray, her mother, Angela, appeared on the porch, her own work clothes neat, her gray-streaked hair pulled back. Their smiles were a silent language, exchanged without words. They worked side by side, loading crates of vegetables into the bed of their old pickup. Tomatoes, lettuce, bell peppers, all vibrant and perfect. But before the market, there was another ritual. Naomi slipped into the barn, pulling aside a heavy tarp to reveal worn blue training mats. The scent that rose from them, leather, hay, and the faint, enduring trace of her father's cologne, was a time machine. "Power comes from discipline, Naomi, not anger," his voice echoed in her memory as she began her stretches. "The strongest oak bends in the wind, but never breaks." She moved through her forms with a fluid, lethal grace. Jabs, crosses, blocks, and sweeps. Each movement was precise, controlled, a prayer of muscle and memory. This was her inheritance. Not just the farm, but the silent strength to protect it. At the farmer's market, the air was thick with the smell of fresh bread and cut flowers. They set up their stand with practiced efficiency. "Beautiful tomatoes, Angela," called Mrs. Thompson from the flower stall next door, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Thank you," Angela replied, her voice even, her shoulders tensed for the undercurrent of judgment that always came. The polite nods for her mother, the swift, dismissive glances past her, Naomi had long ago learned to let it slide off her like water, until the laughter came. It cut through the market's murmur, sharp and cruel. Derek Holloway, flanked by Kyle and Mason, swaggered up, their varsity jackets like flags of conquest. "Well, look who it is," Derek announced, his voice a lazy drawl meant to carry. "The Dirt Girl and her mama's little veggie shop." Naomi kept her eyes down, focusing on a perfect tomato. "What's wrong?" Kyle taunted, leaning on the table until it creaked. "Too good to look at us?" "Please move along, boys," Angela said, her voice firm but quiet. We're trying to work." Derek's smile turned venomous. "Work? Is that what you call this?" He bumped the table with his hip. The crate of tomatoes teetered. Naomi reached to steady it, but Derek was faster. A sharp kick sent the crate crashing to the ground. Red fruit burst across the concrete like gore. "Oops," he said, all false innocence. "Guess they were too ripe." Naomi's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Every muscle fiber, every honed instinct screamed at her to move. She could see the angles, the points of weakness. A quick strike to the throat, a sweep of the leg. She could have him on the ground before he drew another breath. "Naomi!" Her mother's voice was a whisper, but it was an anchor. She knelt, her hands shaking as she gathered the pulpy ruins. The boy's laughter echoed around her, each chuckle a shard of glass in her skin. She focused on her breathing, just as her father had taught her. In, out, control. That evening, the weight of the humiliation hung between them in the kitchen. "You showed great restraint today," Angela said, stirring a pot of bean soup. "Your father would be proud." "Silence isn't weakness," her mother corrected gently. "Sometimes it's the strongest choice. Your daddy used to say true power isn't about throwing the first punch. It's about knowing when to throw it at all." But later, in the barn, restraint was a distant memory. The storm inside her broke loose. She moved through advanced katas, her body a whirlwind of controlled fury. A spinning back kick shattered a practice board with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. She was no longer just practicing. She was communing with the ghost of her father, showing him the warrior he had created. In the doorway, Angela watched, her heart a tangled knot of pride and terror. Her daughter had surpassed her father, her grief forged into something formidable. The confrontation came on a dirt road fringed by oak trees. Naomi was walking home, her mind on a biology test she'd aced, when they stepped from behind a tree. "The dirty little farm girl," Derek sneered, blocking her path. "Move aside," she said, her voice low. Kyle shoved her from behind. She stumbled, then a harder push from Mason sent her sprawling into a muddy patch. The cold, wet earth soaked through her clothes. They laughed, high-fiving. "Look at her now, right where she belongs." As she pushed herself up, Kyle's foot pressed down on her backpack, pinning her. "Not until you beg." His hand rose, ready to strike. Time dilated. She saw the blow coming, saw the cruel anticipation in his eyes, and in that suspended second, she heard her father's voice, clear and calm. "Know when to fight." This was the moment. Her hand shot up, catching his wrist an inch from her face. His eyes widened in shock as her fingers tightened. With a fluid motion, she rose, using his momentum against her. A twist of his arm, a sweep of her leg, and he was airborne, crashing face first into the mud with a satisfying thud. Mason lunged. She grabbed his arm, stepped inside his guard, and executed a perfect hip throw. He landed on his back with a grunt, the air rushing from his lungs. Derek stood frozen, his bravado evaporated. He tried to back away, but she was a blur of motion, a hook behind his knee, a push to his chest, and he joined his friends in the dirt. She stood over them, breathing steadily, mud staining her clothes, her stance perfect. "Don't mistake silence for weakness," she said, her voice cold and clear. "I've been quiet because I chose to be. Touch me again, and I won't be so gentle." She walked away, not looking back, the sounds of their groaning a symphony at her back. But victory was short-lived. The system she'd defied closed ranks with a vengeance. The next day, the irrigation lines were slashed. At school, teachers avoided her gaze, students whispered as she passed. Then came the suspension, based on the boy's twisted testimony. Sheriff's deputies came asking questions. The final, vicious blow came in the chicken coop, their best layers dead, necks broken. Naomi curled on her bed that night, sobbing, clutching her father's photo. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she choked out. "I've ruined everything." It was her mother who pulled her from the abyss. She placed a faded photo of Naomi's father in his uniform on the bed. "Your father didn't teach you to fight for glory. He taught you to protect what matters. This farm, this family, our dignity." The words were a spark. Naomi looked out at the land, the soil that held generations of her family's sweat and dreams. Richard Holloway thought he could break them with fear and lies, but he had no idea what he was truly up against. For 2 days, she trained not with anger, but with purpose. Every chore became part of her drill. Every movement was refined, every technique perfected. She was no longer preparing to win a fight, she was preparing to defend a legacy. The attack came under a full moon. The crickets fell silent. Naomi heard the crunch of gravel, the whispered voices. Through the window she saw them, Derek, Kyle, Mason, and 3 larger men with hard faces. They carried gasoline cans. Her blood ran cold. They weren't here to bully, they were here to burn them out. She moved silently into the yard, clicking on a lantern just as Derek raised a can toward the barn. "This is my home," her voice rang out, steady and strong. "You'll never take it." One of the hired men laughed. "Little girl playing tough. Go back to bed." "Last warning. Leave now." They rushed her. The first man threw a wild punch. She slipped past it, using his momentum to send him crashing into Kyle and Mason. Derek swung a gas can at her head. She ducked and swept his legs. The second man tried to grab her from behind. She drove an elbow into his solar plexus and took him down. The third pulled a knife. Moonlight glinted on the blade as he slashed. She weaved back, caught his wrist and twisted. The knife fell as she drove him face first into the ground. It was over in seconds. 6 attackers lay scattered and beaten in the dirt, their plan in ruins. Naomi stood among them, tall and unbroken, her breath even. She hadn't broken a sweat. Derek scrambled for the knife. She stamped on his hand, yanking him up by his collar. "Look at me," she commanded. "Look at what you tried to do. Look at what it got you." His arrogance was finally, utterly broken. As dawn broke, Angela stepped onto the porch, phone in hand. "I'm calling the sheriff." "Wait," Naomi said, pulling out her phone. "There's something you need to hear first." She pressed play. Derek's voice bragged about scaring them off the land. Then Richard Holloway's cold, calculating tones. "Break whatever you have to. Kill their livestock. I don't care how it happens." With evidence in hand and news vans already rolling up the driveway, the tide turned. Sheriff Matthews, with reporters watching, had no choice. Richard Holloway was led from his mansion in handcuffs. The suspension was wiped from Naomi's record. The school board implemented new policies. Weeks later, Naomi walked the school halls again, not as a ghost, but as a known quantity. Mr. Daniels found her, a scholarship application in hand. The board was very impressed, given recent events. She drove home that afternoon, the future stretching out before her. The farm was safe, protected by new legal covenants. The barn sported fresh red paint, a gift from neighbors finally brave enough to show their support. That evening, as fireflies blinked in the gathering dark, Naomi practiced her forms in the yard. Her movements were fluid, powerful, but peaceful. Each kick, each strike was a promise, a connection to her father, and a commitment to the future he had fought for. Angela watched from the porch, her daughter's silhouette moving against the sunset. She was no longer just a farm girl. She was a protector, a warrior, rooted deep in the land she had fought so hard to defend. The quiet had not been broken. It had been fortified. And Naomi Carter stood within it, finally, completely at home.